As we're live, I appreciate you guys showing up today. What we are doing is we are going to learn how to read, understand, and rebut an appraisal. That is critically important for the people in this room, for the realtors and loan officers. So let's get into the power training session. Guys, I don't want to make this long. I want this to be something that you learn real critical, important information and that you can use every day in your business so that you can better serve your sellers and your buyers. So let's get right into it, guys, right? So today, thank you for coming. Today's event is hosted by the Home Buyer Learning Center. Thank you very much, HBLC, for having this. This is a great opportunity to learn and level up and improve your game as a professional real estate person. So, guys, without further ado, let me tell you who we are. For those, I've always thought that when you're going to get coaching, training, mentorship, or anything like that, you kind of want to know who you're hearing from. So for those people who don't know me in the room, my name is Berio. I'm the co-founder of the Home Buyer Learning Center. I have helped about 1,000 or more people into their new homes, first-time home buyers, and just accomplish those home ownership dreams and goals. It's my passion. It's what I do. It's what I've built this place for. So this is who I am. I'm 20 years in the business, and so I want to take what I've learned. I'd love to bottle that up and make a couple of courses so that you guys can grow and you guys can learn from it. So today is a sliver of what I've learned over the years, and it has to do with appraisal values. Guys, today, someone with maybe even a little more experience and as far as years are concerned, and a ton more experience in appraisal values is my friend Jason Ferguson. We've worked together for many years, and he has helped us with tons of appraisals. I want to make something really clear. Jay is not just an appraiser who you might think would go out and appraise some property here and there and do a couple a week. He quite literally manages a company that has overseen, he owns a company rather, has overseen 100,000 appraisals. That's a real number, 100,000 appraisals. So if you want to understand your value, there is not a better person in the industry, in the New York metro area, that is better than Jason. So thank you, sir, for coming down and helping us with that.
I noticed you left out of your bio the $1 billion in the mortgage totals.
Yeah,
you were very happy with that the other day, and I don't even see it up there.
So Jason and I, we were teasing. So, in my career, we have funded over 2,500 real estate transactions, and it turns out that eclipses the 1 billion lending mark. So yes, thank you. In my career, I have lent over $1 billion in mortgage loans. It's a real fun number to say, but
it's actually
thanks.
Impressive. $1 billion is a big number.
Thank you. So guys, let's get into it. So, I wanted you to understand that we are experienced, and I want to share that experience with you and help you grow so you can be better in your field, in your industry. So today is all about how to read and rebut an appraisal value. In this market, how many times are we talking about appraisals that don't come in and don't make value? All right, this is happening. This is happening quite a bit. You have homes that are listed for one number. They get $25,000, $35,000, $40,000 over asking, and they want the appraisal to come in for that number, but maybe it comes in a little less. And then we, as professional real estate people or loan officers, want to maybe argue that value. And we need to be armed with information. Before we can argue an appraisal value, we actually need to understand an appraisal. So today we're going to go over the difference between an appraisal and an inspection. We're also going to touch very, very briefly at the end about seminars and client education. And then we're going to really spend most of our time diving into understanding how to read an appraisal report and how it is that we get to the value at the bottom of an appraisal.
I'd say the biggest thing you can take away from an inspection versus an appraisal is this. The inspector is there to look at structural issues, engineering, roof, plumbing. The appraiser really doesn't, not to say he doesn't care about it, but it's not what we're there. We're there to value the house. And we're not there to value the house on behalf of the buyer. We're there to value the house on behalf of the lender. So we're technically working for the lender, and they want to know, and we've used this a lot of times when someone asks what your real role is as the appraiser. The role of the appraiser is to go out and see the house and to make sure that if the buyer gets hit by a bus tomorrow, that when the bank takes the house back, there's enough collateral for them to not only get themselves out of that deal, but possibly turn a small profit in the time it takes them to move that property back off their books. Whereas your home inspector or your engineer is going to tell you that the gutters are leaking, that there's a problem in the basement, that the plumbing isn't quite right, or that the electric needs to be upgraded. And those are the two main differences between the inspector and the appraiser when we go out there. A lot of times people ask us as the appraiser, can you note this or that on the appraisal because there's a problem with the house, and we want to see if we can argue it. That's not our role. That's why we tell them you should, on every house, recommend that the people get a home inspection, preferably from an engineer as opposed to just a home inspector, because they're much more qualified. So that's your main takeaway when someone talks about the difference between an inspection versus an appraisal, that inspector is there on behalf of the buyer. We're there just on behalf of the bank. I mean, honestly, the realtor, the buyer, and the seller, although they're important parts, we're not representing any of them, and we're only answering to the lender. So.
And that's really critical, because when we talk about this seminar being how to rebut an appraisal value, we're going to talk about logistically how that happens, because since the realtor does not have direct contact with the appraiser, how does that all happen? So we're going to close the gap, and we're going to help to create some understanding there for you guys, so that if you want to increase your value, combat your value, perhaps remove or add an additional comparable sale to the appraisal, we're going to show you how that happens, since we as the lender are ordering the appraisal, how we can go and help you to combat that value. So let's get right into it. Thanks for explaining the difference between an inspection and an appraisal, Jay, but let's talk about the appraisal. Many realtors in the room also probably don't do a whole lot of reading and seeing appraisals unless you have an issue. So when you see it and you have an issue perhaps with a value or maybe a property condition issue, I don't want that deal to be the first time you've ever seen one. Today you're going to see and understand what it is you would be reading in the event that you are dealing with one of those situations. So let's get right into it, understanding your appraisal. So the first part is understanding. We're going to go through that. We're going to also learn how to rebut, and we're going to talk about appraisal fun facts and some additional information that you can pull from your appraisal report that's going to help you to better serve your seller and or your buyer. Guys, this is pretty crazy looking, I would agree, right? Everyone would agree. Show of hands, does this look like really fun to read?
And you all have that in your thing, so you can look at it a little more clearly than having to see it up here.
So now we figured you guys can't really read it, right? So if you look through your folders, you can follow along. We included each page that's up here right on your lap. All right? So this is a lot. This is kind of a lot to look at. When we see forms like this, I can tell you that when I look at this right away, it's pretty intimidating, no? It doesn't look very easy to read. It looks like you need to be a professional. It looks like sort of doctor language. What we're going to do is we're going to break down each page and show you where you should focus your energy, where you should focus your attention so that you can actually make an argument for an increased value or perhaps a new comp. Guys, so these first few pages, let's go page by page and identify what each page is all about.
Just so you guys understand, this was an actual appraisal that was done recently. We took the street address, the borrower, and the lender out for privacy purposes, but this was something that was done. We picked this particular appraisal for a reason. That reason being, and if you want to just real quickly take a look, the contract price for this house was $755,000. You can see it right there on your list. If you look a little bit higher, your list price was $699,000.
So guys, it was listed for $699,000. The contract sales price was $755,000, right? So this is pretty typical in this market, no?
And that's happening every day, basically.
Happening every day.
Now, on page 2, which we'll get to later, the appraised value was $724,000. So we beat the realtor's list price by $25,000. Unfortunately, we didn't get to where the buyer and the bidding war ended up, which was $755,000. So that was the reason why we picked this as our appraisal for you guys to look at. This is basically exactly what happens to you guys on a regular basis in this industry in Nassau and Suffolk County every day.
Right, so we want to really make it something that's real. It's not contrived. This was an actual real appraisal that just happened. So you're looking at real information, not make-believe stuff for the sake of this seminar. This is a legitimate deal that's happening right now. So let's take a look at the first page of this appraisal report, and what does the first page tell us? All right, so now we're going to understand something really fast before we break down the first 1, 2, and 3 pages of the appraisal report. Appraisal reports are 25, 30 pages, okay? Many of these pages are disclosures, disclaimers, pictures of comps, pictures of the house, pictures of the rooms and stuff. We don't really need all that. When it comes to understanding value and how we got to the value, these 3 pages are the main pages, maybe even 4 pages I should say, are the main pages that we're going to show you today that you need to key in on when it comes to understanding your value, okay? So page number 1, Jay, why don't you tell us about that?
Okay, so we start with our legal description. It's the subject section up on the top. It's going to give you all your information about the house, meaning the address, the town that it's in, your zip code, your taxes, your section, block, and lot, which is obviously crucial to the house itself, and then your census tract, which the census tract, in case any of you want to know or need to know, is a number derived by the United States. It's based on the US Census they do. And if you pulled up that particular census number, you would see all the demographics that come along with that particular number, meaning the median income for the neighborhood, the breakdown of race and demographics, and everything else that falls with it. And that's why it has to be on the report. We don't use it as appraisers, and you guys don't use it, but when the government and Fannie Mae takes it back, the census tract is actually important for that. Also up there you have your client, which in this case is private, and it also has the information about the listing itself, which, as we said, was $699. Not bad, because they got $750 for it. So after that, we go to a contract breakdown. So we're required as the appraiser to get the contract on every transaction. It gives us the entire contract fully executed. And from there, we have to put in things like the $500 seller's credit and that information, the contract price, the date of the contract, is the property seller the owner of record, so that way someone doesn't try to sell a house that isn't theirs. Those type of things are covered in your top
So there's
section.
a verification process just determining, is this person on contract, the actual legal owner, right? This is not something that we can just throw a quick appraisal order up there. They have to actually get a contract. I think the old adage is something is only worth what someone's willing to pay for it, right? That's why the contract price is important to put on there. It's like, okay, well, they're willing to pay for it. Let's try to get to that value. So that's what that contract section is all about.
It also breaks down, it wasn't used in this case, but in some other cases you have seller's concessions when you guys put them in, gifts of equity, additional buyers on the job, whoever else is on the loan if they don't fit on the top section. Anything else, if it's an estate sale, an REO, a short sale, all that would be in there, so that way the reader knows exactly what they're dealing with in this particular transaction.
Nice.
Thanks.
Number 3, so we have room count and GLA. What is that all about?
So your room count is your above grade, and they actually highlight the word above grade, finished rooms. Your bathrooms do not count as rooms in the house, so it's just a total of the other rooms excluding the bathrooms. So in this case, for this particular house, you had a kitchen, a living room, a dining room, 3 bedrooms, which is 6 rooms in total, your bath and a half, and then you had 1,270 square feet of gross living area above grade. And above grade is very crucial when you're doing an appraisal and when you're marketing, selling, or dealing with a house, even on the mortgage side. We'll get a little more in depth into that a little further along. The bottom part is your breakdown of the house improvements, capital improvements that were made, any major improvements. When I say major improvements, it's things that we're going to give specific value to. And in the case of an appraisal, there are things that we don't value and there's things that we do. Capital improvements are things like central air conditioning, fireplaces, porches, patios, decks, in-ground sprinklers, things like that. Going above and beyond on particular things doesn't get you extra money. So if you put mahogany floors down in your house, it's not going to show up there because it's not something that's a typical item. It's a personal preference. Anything that's not permanent for the house, an above ground pool, a hot tub, sheds, none of those count as value items either. You may have to get COs for them by the town, they may tax you on them, but they're not items that we're going to value on the appraisal because they're not what's considered a permanent feature of the house.
That's important. I mean, how many times has someone done something like a hot tub or a sauna room? It costs $5,000 to put in an electrical sub panel. It costs $10,000 to buy a hot tub. You put a $15,000 improvement on there. You think you're going to sell the house for more money, but it does not help your value. It might help the sellable nature of your house and how appealing it is, but this is about brass tacks. This is about your value. What is going to increase the value of my home? That's the important part. So we're gonna dispel a lot of the things that aren't gonna bring the value. What we're gonna talk about today is things like the GLA, the gross living area, and we're gonna highlight a section just on how to determine what is gross living area in a few slides. So it's really important stuff.
Just a fun fact before he goes forward. If you take an above ground pool and sink it into the ground, it's still an above ground pool. A lot of times we're hearing homeowners tell us, oh, my semi-in-ground pool, or I sunk my above ground pool into the ground and now it's an in-ground pool. The pool company told me, I got the CO to prove it. No. Unless it's a permanent in-ground pool, meaning built in the ground, it is not an in-ground pool. So if you guys hear that, you can just shake your head like I do and you have to move on. The last important thing on this page, and Christian and I didn't even go over it, but it is important. it asks here if there are any physical deficiencies or adverse conditions. And it says here, the appraiser is not an expert or an engineer and that a home inspector should be used. That goes back to the inspection versus appraisal. That's us covering ourselves to say that we're not engineers, we're not versed in structure, and that's our disclaimer. So if the house falls down, it's not on us, it's on the home inspector. And that's just another reason why it's in there, because there is a big difference between the two.
Nice. Great. So let's take a look now at the second page. So really the first page is identifying characteristics, right? That's really what it is. But the second page is where we really get into what is the house worth and how did we get to that number. So let's go into these major components. This second page of the appraisal really being probably one of the most critical. Jay, tell us about it, please.
You have all of your adjustments in here between the subject and the comparables. We highlighted a couple of areas. The date of sale, which is very important. Obviously, recent sales are better. The gross living area of the house, and then just the adjustments that we make in general. So those are some of your main criteria for how we're determining value and what is a comp and what is not a comparable. And if you want to hit it once, I'll go to...
Sure. Guys, so we're going to zoom in a quick second here. So we want to focus on this section of that second page. We highlighted it for you so you could take a look at it real closely.
And oddly enough, it's just the addresses of these houses. And you would say, why is the address that important? The biggest factor for a house, Nassau and Suffolk County.
Hold on, let's have them guess. Anybody want to guess what the biggest value factor is? Got a hot cup of coffee, got your name on it if you know that answer.
Can you repeat that? What was the question?
What is the biggest, in Nassau and Suffolk County, what is the biggest determining factor for the value of your home? It's based on the address.
Comparable sales in the neighborhood.
Incorrect.
What did he say?
You said comparable sales in the neighborhood.
Proximity
To what?
to the subject property.
Incorrect.
You're getting
Square
close.
footage.
Incorrect. Whoa! Hey, buddy, you got it back in the back, way in the back. That's a good throw, right?
As an appraiser in Nassau and Suffolk County, and I'm just giving you how we normally do it, I'd say 95 to 97% of the appraisers that do appraisals in Nassau and Suffolk, in our experience, will never cross a school district line, ever.
Guys, that's a huge, can you say it one more time loud for the people in the back? That's a huge, huge fact.
95 to 97% of the appraisers who know what they're doing and have been appraising for a while in Nassau and Suffolk County will not cross a school district line ever. So if your house is in, let's say, Massapequa Schools, they're not going out of the Massapequa School District. And conversely, if your house is located in Syosset, they're not going into Roslyn. The school district in Nassau and Suffolk is the biggest determining value of property value. And it's easy to see. When you do multiple properties in these neighborhoods and you look just outside of the school districts, there are giant differences in value between one school district and another. And that is the people's buying power and what they want, showing you right there which school districts are better and which school districts are more important. And it comes down to, and it's not something we can even adjust for, which is why we won't cross the school district line. We're talking about sports programs, arts, cultural stuff that they do, extracurricular activities, special programs for the kids in need, the ones that are disabled or disability challenged. All those things vary from school district to school district. And that's one of the main reasons why we don't. And then the other is, each school district has its own separate, you're being taxed, mainly you're paying school tax more than you're paying the taxes for your village or the taxes for the county that you're in. Those taxes are different from one school district to another. So as a result, those major factors, we don't cross school district lines. And it happens again and again that we see houses, say in Massapequa School District 23, and someone says, oh, well, Plainage is right up the road and it's only a block away and I've got a great comp and it's the exact same house. And it's selling for $25,000 less. Why is it selling for $25,000? Because it's not in that same school district. You know, and that is very common.
We got to think about that, right? So when we hear our realtor friends and our realtors here in the room also say things like, hey, what's going on with my appraisal? I have a guy down the block that sold his house for $100,000 more. The first question that Jason is going to ask, is it in the same school district? Period. It's always the first question. And if you can say, yeah, it is in a different school district, then it's not even a comp, which is crazy because it could be a block away. So
Yeah.
it's really kind of crazy how that small factor makes a giant difference in the value of a home.
I did a house last week myself. I was in the Brentwood postal zone, but I was in the town of Islip School District. That house went for $100,000 more than a house a block and a half away. There's no other difference. It's not me saying that the difference is $100,000 as the appraiser. The comps within my school district for the exact same house were selling for $100,000 more than just a block or two away. And that, you'll see it time and time again in neighborhood after neighborhood, and that's the main reason why we don't cross the school district line.
So
It's not something we can adjust for.
So as silly and as obvious as it sounds, your eyeballs should immediately go to the address.
It's the most important thing. When people say they have a great comp, you should say, hey, first question, is that in our school district? Because that is one of the main determining factors in value.
Great. So let's take a look again at the next part that is also critically important. The date of sale. Jason, why is the date of sale important on our property, that our subject property versus our comparables?
Obviously, you want the houses that are most similar and most recently sold, because that's going to give you the best idea as to what's happening right now in the market. I mean, our market has been consistently going up now for quite a while. With the interest rates going up, you may start to see a downturn. But as the market trends up or trends down, you want the most similar comps, so that they're usually the most recent. The only reason you will go back further in time is if you had limited sales to choose from, or the house you had was very unique in some aspect.
So what is the appraisal industry standard for the amount of time that you look back that is a valid amount of time?
Normally the maximum you're allowed to go back is a full year, but most appraisers want to stay within 3 months if they can, 6 months max. If you're going back 9 months or a year, you have a detailed explanation in an addendum as to why you had to travel back that far in time to find a viable sale to represent your house. And you also have to explain that your house isn't an anomaly, meaning that you had limited sales to choose from, and that's why you had to go back that far.
Right, so in this crazy, crazy market, question in the back?
Yeah.
So, I know you said NASA stuff in terms of what's the biggest determining factor. What about outside, like in the boroughs and stuff? Is it similar?
The hardest part about the boroughs is you have all the charter schools that the kids can go to. That's not really an option for the public school system. So we don't put as much onus on the school district in Queens and Brooklyn and the Bronx when we do the appraisals. In the boroughs, the proximity is really the most important thing. Where if you were in Nassau and Suffolk County and you had to go a half mile away, that wouldn't be the end of the world. In Brooklyn, Queens, Manhattan, and the Bronx, you shouldn't be more than a quarter mile away from your house. That then ensures that you're within your subject neighborhood, because now you're kind of falling within the PS system that's right in that particular area. So I would say if you were doing work in the boroughs, your main thing you want to be is close to the house as possible. Because the red flag that throws up as an appraiser, if you're reviewing or if an underwriter is looking at it, if you're in the boroughs and you're 3/4 of a mile away or a mile away, you're really not in the same neighborhood anymore. And if you're experienced in the boroughs, you know that each neighborhood is a small little pocket.
Yeah.
So that would be, if you're in the boroughs, I would say you definitely are going to that more.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
So in terms of schools, what if the property is literally right in front of a school? Does that affect the value of it?
Sure, that would be an external problem. It's a negative problem.
It's a negative.
Yeah,
A
so you-
function obsolescence, is that what it is?
An external obsolescence.
External.
You would take value off of the house due to increased foot traffic, increased car traffic, increased noise. Your average person wouldn't want to have 250 kids walking past their house every morning and an extra 100 cars driving up and down their block, along with the school buses, the teachers, the kids screaming at lunch, and so on and so forth.
But now, how do realtors sell that? They sell it as walking distance to the school,
Right.
right? Walking distance to the train station across the street, walking distance to blah, blah, blah. So there's a way that they're going to sell it, but we have to also say that's fine to try to get someone to buy the house and pay the most that they're going to pay for it. But that is not what we want to call our experience and knowledge when we're trying to share with our sellers and our buyers why we've hit a certain number on our value. We need to be able to justify it. You can sell it as a selling feature, and there's many people, many people, especially people living in Bronx, Brooklyn, Queens, who come out to the suburbs and go, I want to live by train station. They need the immediate quick access to get in and out of the city, perhaps for work or anything like that. However, that's a value item to them, but when it comes to determining a value of the property, there's going to be an adjustment for it. So it actually is a really great segue to the next slide. We're going to start to actually talk about some of the things that Jason was hitting on, which was GLA, the gross living area. But how does someone adjust for the value? Where's the plus and minus on dollars? How does that work? So Jay, can you tell us about the gross living area, and then we'll get into adjustments?
Okay, just so you all understand the gross living area of the house, and on page 1, if you flip back to it real quick, and we'll just leave this slide up.
Sure.
They're talking about above grade, finished area above grade. They have it highlighted. It's towards the bottom middle section of the prior page. The above grade living area. And it has the room count, and then it says 1,270 square feet on page 1.
Page 1 down on the bottom section.
Mm-hmm. It looks like this. Well, it actually looks like that on page 1. But the wording above grade is very important.
Guys, page 1 right about here. Right about here, page 1.
So we hear this a lot. The basement's been finished. I have egress windows. I have 2 forms of egress through 2 different staircases, and we got a CO from the town. So we're counting that as living area, right? No, you are not. You're paying taxes on it. You got CO'd for it, and you paid top dollar to have it done. But it does not count as living area for the house. It counts as a basement, and you only get basement credit for it. Why? Because Fannie Mae sets what we are and are not allowed to count as living area. They've recently, and you can go online and look this up so you can even be more informed than everyone else if you want, set what they call it ANSI, A-N-S-I. It is the criteria for what appraisers have to call living area versus non-living area. And in that, it says that even if it's partially below grade, meaning that, let's say your house is built on a hill, and 3 sides of your house is a walkout, you have full panoramic glass, goes out to the pool, it's great, bathrooms down there, it's still a basement. It has to be completely above grade to be considered living area based on, excuse me, based on the Fannie Mae guidelines as they stand today. It used to be, you could call it part base, part above, but now that they've set this is pretty much set in stone. Every appraiser has to consider basement, regardless of how it's finished, regardless of what rooms are down there, and if they have a CO, as a basement. So your above grade living area, above ground level, whatever you have, not counting things that are unfinished, like a screened-in porch or a patio or a garage. And that's how we're getting the total usable gross living area for the house. Why is the gross living area important? When we do an appraisal as appraisers, we're required to stay within 20 to 25% of that gross living area. So if you have a 1,000 square foot house, you have to be within 250 feet of that maximum. The closer you are to 1,000 square feet, because that's what your house is, the more accurate whoever looks at your report is going to think it is.
So let's break that down just a little slower, because my mind works a lot slower than yours when it comes to calculating things like that. So using some simple numbers here, if your subject property is 1,000 square feet, you cannot use a comparable sale that has a 20% variance in square foot, livable square foot area, right? So 1,000 square feet, you can only include homes up to 1,200 square feet down to 800 square feet. If a house is 750 or 1,250, not even a comparable. It's not a comparable, it's not usable. How many times has a real estate agent put a deal together showing colonial, and they market their property because it has a finished basement with another 800 square feet? Number one, that basement, as Jason was saying, is not actually gross living area. You cannot even count it. And then, when they hear the value, might not have come in, what comps do you think they're going to send you? Comps that have other basements with, these are not usable comps. We must only use comparable houses with a gross living area with no greater than a 20% variance in the gross living area. Make sense? So adjustments. All right, so now we're like, okay, well, we've kind of refined. We can't use a much bigger house. We can't use a much smaller house. We can't use a house really far away. We can't use a house in a different school district. Well, then how is one house worth any different than another house? How does my house that I think is worth more than my neighbor's, but it's exactly the same, but I really believe mine's worth more? How do we adjust for the actual value? So, Jay, can you talk about how we measure adjustments to determine plus or minus?
So the adjustments are made, and we give a couple examples in the report, and they're based on a couple of different things. The first is what's called paired sales analysis. If you have 2 of the houses that are exactly the same, and the only difference between the 2 houses is, let's say, a fireplace, The difference in those two sale prices is what the fireplace is actually worth to a buyer. Not what it costs to put in the fireplace, but basically an intrinsic value that if you're a buyer and you see the house, you're like, well, they're both the same. This house has got the fireplace though. You know what? I'd pay $4 or $5 grand more for that. You can see that in the market, and it happens a lot. One of the other things we use is contractor estimates for what things cost to put in. We're not using 100% of that. We're using a variance of or a percentage of what they're telling us certain things cost. And then the last part is the fact that we've been doing this for so long, most of us, that you have an adjustment number that you see as typical for the neighborhood in your head because you're so experienced in that neighborhood. And please understand this. For this particular house, let's just use the fireplace adjustment, which is $6,000 here. It's highlighted on your second page. That $6,000 fireplace adjustment, now our house has the fireplace, the comparable doesn't. So we're taking this purchase price up top of the house, adding $6,000 to it because our house is more desirable than the comparable.
So guys, let's just real quick sit on that for just a second, because you're going to see in the adjustments pluses and minuses. So what does that mean for us? Our subject property being the first line has 1 fireplace. Our comparable has none. So why does the house that has none getting plus 6,000? It's not the house that has no fireplace getting plus 6. Our subject property is getting a plus $6,000 adjustment because we do have a fireplace and they do not. Okay?
So we're reflecting it in their cost of their house to project what our house is worth by adding that in. That $6,000 is reflective of the neighborhood as well. Now in this particular case, we're in a $700,000 neighborhood. The fireplace adjustment is $6,000. If we were in a $1.7 million neighborhood, that fireplace adjustment might be $20,000. Because A, the buyer has more money to spend, B, that fireplace is worth more to them, and C, that fireplace is going to be more elaborate than in that neighborhood. I'm not saying that these people can't put in a nice fireplace, but you're going to see more high-end finishes the higher up you go in these particular houses. If we were taking a kitchen and bath adjustment, for example, or just a kitchen adjustment in a $400,000 or $500,000 neighborhood, that may be a $15,000 adjustment. In a $2 million neighborhood, that may be a $100,000 adjustment, because in those neighborhoods, a kitchen alone costs $300,000, $400,000.
All right, guys, the third page, right? So if you turn to the third page, it's about half blank. And the top portion, you'll see on the right-hand side, leaves a blank comparable section. There's another spot left blank for a potential comparable. Jay, why is there blanks on this page?
There's usually blanks on every appraisal, and you can go out indefinitely with comparables. In this report, we have possibility for 6, but you can go out to 9, 12, 15, because there is always a chance of rebuttal. So I usually like to leave a blank in case somebody comes up with something. The appraiser is not perfect. If you do find a good comparable, they'll add it to the report. Me personally, I take comparables from realtors when I'm at the house. I'll look at them. If there's something good, I'll hang on to them. If they're not, obviously, just like every other appraiser, they're probably going to go in the trash, or they're just going to stay in the file and not be used. But that space is there just in case we did miss something, or in case there's a rebuttal and you have to put something in there. It's also nice to keep an open space, because if someone does come up with a great comp, you want to put it on the grid itself while you're in your office and look at it to see how it adjusts out. Sometimes it's a great comp, but once you start making adjustments, it ends up hurting your value more than. And now you can actually take a screenshot of that, send it back to them and say, hey, look, you had a great comp. It's a recent sale. It looked pretty good. But now that we started making adjustments based on the rest of the report, because you have to be consistent all the way through, here's the page. I've added it in at the end. This doesn't help our value. It actually hurts our value. You want me to keep it in there, or are we okay leaving it the way we were? So we do have 2 comps on this page. They're not on the first page. They're on the second. Why? They're not as good. So usually you have to have more than 3 comparables to begin with. The banks like that. In this case, we have 5. These 2 are here because they're not bad, but they're not great. Why? A lot of adjustments. 94,000 here. This one, commercial property, and it's very on the fringe of our neighborhood. And I'll show you what neighborhood means in a moment. But that's why these 2 comparables are in the report, but they're not considered that great as far as first page comparables.
Yeah, guys, if you look at comparable number 5, right? Once you start to see what looks like, a math test over here on the right-hand side, or a receipt of adjustments, you're not really close on the property and the comparable nature of that house to our number 1. If we back up a second and we look at the first page of comparables, the most heavily weighted house has the least amount of math. Why? Because it's more closely a comparable to our subject property. So if we sell a house and an agent says, oh my God, that house, like Alex was saying, oh my God, that house, we were waiting for it to sell. It's there. If it is a real comparable, we can make it, and it's not going to come just here, but now, correct me if I'm wrong, Jay, it's going to move up the weighted scale.
Exactly.
All right, so guys, really, really great stuff here. Thanks, Jay. All right, let's room for more comments, appraiser comments. What are some of the comments that might be here from an appraiser's perspective?
Sometimes we'll use this area to comment if there was any type of problem with the sale or if anything different happened because of the sale. And when I say that, I mean maybe it was a house that sold prior, it was in bad shape, it was renovated, and now it's selling at another price. We would need to explain that there. I personally don't use this space very often. I have almost what we consider like a book of addendum pages. I didn't include them because they're very wordy, very lengthy, and a lot of them are just things the bank wants to see. Usually it's 3 to 5 pages worth of stuff, but in that verbiage, you would put all your comments from here into that section. It also, you're going into a description of which comps are more important and why these comps made it to the second page as opposed to the first page. The fact that this one has a lot of net and gross adjustments, which is why it wasn't weighted as heavily. Things like that would all be in the comment section. Believe it or not, there's so many comments they wouldn't fit in there, which is why we have separate pages for it. But that's normally what would go in those comments. If someone rebutted an appraisal and came up with a great comp and we added it in, you would put a comment in here saying the comparable 6 was added, it was given to me by the lender. It's never by the realtor, just so you guys know too, and we'll get to that later, by the lender. And after reviewing it, it's a viable sale, we added it in. Either it did assist in adjusting the value or it did not, or after adjustments, it still supports the value that we have. Those are the type of comments you would put in the additional comment section.
Right, so that is the first 3 pages of the appraisal report. We're going to go to another page. I don't think it's quite, page 4, but it's a 4th page that we thought was really important to add. It's usually down towards the bottom section of the full 25-page appraisal, but as the 4th page, we've added what is the aerial map of the neighborhood. And this is a really, I kind of like looking at this when I'm looking at appraisals. I skim through those first few pages. I understand how they've arrived to that price, but I also like to do a quick little aerial shot and see where are my comparables, right? So Jay, tell us about the aerial map and what's that used for?
And just so you guys understand, because it doesn't look like it here, comparable 4, it looks like it's below Sunrise Highway. It's actually located just above Sunrise Highway. And the reason why I'm saying that is it makes a big difference. It's within our neighborhood as opposed to being on the other side of a major roadway, which would be out of our neighborhood. And also the other reason why comparable 4 was comparable 4 was it is basically backing up on Sunrise Highway. So our house is on a quiet residential street. That's a pretty big difference. So it didn't make it to the first page. But in looking at the map, I always like to explain that because most people look at it and go, wait a minute, that house doesn't even look like it's in the neighborhood. It's on the wrong side of the road. It's just how it was placed in this particular report, but it is on the other side of the street. Now, the map of the neighborhood is important. It identifies the boundaries that we're talking about. Now, the boundaries are set by a couple of different things. Natural dividers. This happens to be Massapequa Park. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. This is the Massapequa Preserve. That is a natural divider. So any parks, preserves, golf courses, things like that that are, not really man-made. Well, I guess the golf course is man-made, but nature buffer. So this is separating Massapequa Park from Massapequa.
Look at the size of this natural buffer. Look at the size of this thing, right? It goes all the way from Southern State Parkway all the way down to, below Sunrise Highway. This is, you got to cross a bridge and you got to really trek quite a bit to get to this side. So as you can notice, all of our comparable sales are around encompassing our subject property, right? Making it clear and obvious that our comparables are comparable sales, right?
Now the next thing is the school district, which I don't know if any of you still use maps, but there is the old Hagster maps that are floating around somewhere. It's not a bad thing to have as a realtor. The reason it's not a bad thing to have, if you can get them, is it shows every single school district broken down on the map. So you know what school district you're in and what school district you're out of. So if you could still find them, most of us appraisers still have them, we keep them in our offices, but it definitely shows you where every school district line is for every neighborhood in Nassau and Suffolk. It does also break down your Queens and Brooklyn as well, I believe, with the school districts.
So it's important to understand that, right? So now we're understanding by looking at this this map here, right, where the natural divides are. Then they use the school map, which, you know, if you've ever lived in a neighborhood for long enough, you realize, oh my God, I live here, my buddy lives here, but we're in a different school. So now all these houses also within this region hit the same school. And then lastly, man-made dividers.
So in this case, you have Sunrise Highway here, County Line Road right here. If you had to, you can come over to here, but we didn't need to. And then you have the Southern State Parkway. And then here's the preserve coming back down here. That's our neighborhood. And whenever you're looking at an appraisal, or whenever you're looking at where your comp should be, you need to stay within your neighborhood, because if it's not in your neighborhood, it's not really comparable for your house. I mean, I'll give you a perfect example. Our house is here. In this particular appraisal, I had the Realtor give me 3 sales down here. Now, we crossed Sunrise Highway, we crossed Merrick Road, and now we're down into the waterfront community of Nassau Shores. So now, think about it. In Nassau County, Suffolk County especially, the further south you go, the higher the number gets. So yes, it was great. He had 3 great sales. They were down here. But now you're not in your community anymore. You've crossed 2 major roadways, and now you're in a waterfront community when you're nowhere near the water up here. So that was unfortunately our response to this particular appraiser as to why we couldn't use the comparables they provided.
Boom. Okay. So now, through being informed, we can ask all those questions. And what if someone does have a legitimate comparable?
And that does happen. Like I said, we're not perfect. We miss stuff all the time. So it is a possibility. You can't just rule it out and say, oh, there's no way in the world that we're going to get any increase in value. The reason why I take comps from realtors every day is because you never know. They may have something great for you that you didn't see. And the reason you might not see it, believe it or not, is this. For those of you that are familiar with Long Island Multiple Listing Service, you can run the same search 3 times. Usually when you do, if you look at the total number of sales you have with the same exact criteria, you're going to get 3 different numbers, which is very, very weird. So sometimes it selectively gives you additional or removes random sales. So there's a possibility that I ran the same search that someone else ran, and it didn't give me 1 or 2 sales that might have been viable sales. So it's always easier to say, hey, what do you have? Sure, I'll take that. Let me take a look. And if it's great, it's great. And if it's not, thanks a lot. I appreciate it. And I just don't use it. But like I said, that is a possibility. Sure, go ahead.
Just a quick question. So say like you guys did miss something, does another appraisal have to be ordered?
No, that's what we're doing. We're still within the process. We've done the appraisal. It's been submitted to the bank. The realtor cried, the homeowner cried, the buyer cried. You guys are up in arms because you're not going to get your commission. But we're still within the file, so we're okay.
Right. So because, and there's a methodology. There's actually a process that us bankers are the ones who are actually going to file what's called a reconsideration of value, an ROV. And there's a process for us to do that. So if our realtor partner says, yes, here's my comp, and they've asked these questions, is it closed? Did it actually close? Not listed. And it's within our school district. Does it have a similar GLA? Is the condition, room count, the same?
Or similar.
Or similar. We also talked about, is it hitting those natural boundaries? Is it within our neighborhood? Okay, so once we realize we do have a legitimate reason to file a rebuttal of value or reconsideration of value, we're then going to speak with our loan officer and say, hey, I have this comp, please submit this. And the reason that we as the bankers are the people who have to do this reconsideration of value is not because that a broker can or cannot, it's just that we are the person who ordered the appraisal to begin with. It's our appraisal for our purposes of collateral, and so we need to order it, right? So let's look at it. It's a simple 2-pager. Actually, Jay provided this to us many years ago when we needed to reconsider a value. And it's very simple. It just gives us, and asks a couple of quick questions, which comps, so it's not always adding a comp. One thing is actually pretty curious, and we have to lean on the fact that we understand our appraisers are professionals and they know what they're doing, and they're putting usable comps on appraisals. But you can also make a play to say, hey, the comp you put on there is not actually a comp. So removing a comp is also a reconsideration of value, and then adding a comp. So we would either ask to add a comp that we feel is valid after we've asked those disqualifiers, and or remove a comp once we then also consider those disqualifiers.
And why would you remove it? I mean, there could be a variety of different reasons for you to try to argue. I mean, they could have missed something like the house backs up on a nuclear power plant. or there could have a ton of adjustments, and the net and gross adjustments are way out of whack. And if you're looking at the bottom of the appraisal and you're saying, wait a minute, all these houses have a couple of adjustments, but this one has like a ton of adjustments. We can get rid of that because it's got so many, and maybe we have something a little bit better to stick in its place. Or maybe if we lose that one adjustment with a million, that one comparable with a million adjustments, we have one less in there, but now it looks a lot better and the value looks a lot more stable. So that's an idea too for you guys. Look at the bottom line and see what your net and gross adjustments are at the bottom of the appraisal itself on each section. It'll tell you net and gross down here along the bottom part. If the net and gross are very high, technically that's not a great comp. So if you had to get rid of it, that might be a basis for you to argue getting rid of it.
And when we talk about the weighted average, right, if we're going to get rid of one, maybe it helps bump the actual value because we can get rid of maybe not such a great comp. Now, that brings a question to mind. Is there a certain amount of comps you are absolutely required minimally to present?
The bare bones minimum is 3 closed sales. I don't know too many people that do only 3. The reason why we do more than 3 normally is because the more you're putting in there, and if they all have a small variance, it's a lot harder to argue that I have 5 closed sales that are very similar with minimal adjustments, and I came up with this value. They're all right on top of the house. But if I have 3 and you can come up with something great, 3 is really not that many. 5 looks better. So, 3 is the bare bones minimum. By law, you have to have 3.
We're getting to the end of our presentation here. I want to thank Jay for his time. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And
guys, I'd like to say this. When Christian asked me to do this, I said I would definitely love to do it because this is something I have to deal with as the owner of the appraisal management company every day. I mean, we're doing several hundred appraisals a month, and this is happening more often than it's not. But what you guys now have, as far as just what we went over, is a really great tool that sets you apart from 99% of the other people out there as far as just the knowledge on how to attack and how to look at an appraisal and say, is this actually something I can argue or something that I'm going to be stuck with because, hey, you know what, I did get them to pay that much, but unfortunately we're not going to get to that number. It's not feasible. And these type of things are the type of things that are going to set you apart. Some of us have been in this business for a while, and the way you last is by doing things like this. I mean, what he's offering you and what they're presenting, the amount of work that they put in, and then when they put this out there so other people can see it, it's going to be beneficial to a lot of people. So I don't know if you guys realize what you're getting, not me personally, but just how they're doing this and what they're offering you. We're going to go into a slower time. Those of us that have been in the business, we all see it. It's going to be a thinning of the herd. Who's left at the end is going to be the person that can bring the most to the table for their clients consistently and who can close more deals. And what he's teaching you and the different things he's going to give you as options is what's going to make the difference between you becoming a used car salesman or staying in this business for 20, 30 years like some of us. So I really think you should take advantage of whatever they have to offer. I was glad to do this. I hope this helps you guys going forward. It'll make my life easier anytime you guys have a rebuttal against one of my things. At least I know I'm going to get good stuff back. So thank you.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you, Christian.
So guys, thank you. Appreciate that. So before we exit, just wanted to just sort of wrap up a couple of things and just make an offer to you all about some of our co-branded seminars, client education, networking events that we host and we do here. We want to open that up to you guys and let you know that you can work with us and do that. We have consistently, we try to bring client education, home buyer seminars, networking events, photo opportunities, various different things. So we want you to, and much to what Jason was saying, thank you so much, is use it. Use it. It's here for you guys. We want to help you grow your business. We want to level you up. And, mi casa, su casa is the approach, right? So I appreciate, oh, look at this, more stuff. So thank you guys. And one thing that I've learned is in all the education that we do and all the seminars we do, we have to make sure that we remind our referral partners that we're mortgage people who want mortgage deals, right? We can't, one of the things that I've learned that was it's a bit of a mistake sometimes is when we're so eager to teach and help our referral partners grow and do business, we forget to just ask for business. All this education, all this networking events, and all the stuff that we do to help them market and grow is great. But if you don't remind them really what you're after ultimately at the end of the day is to help pre-approve their clients so that you can stay in business and continue to do this stuff. So please just keep in mind what we really are day one, and all the stuff that we do after is just to add value and to become better for our buyers and our sellers and set a better expectation. And that's pretty much it, guys. The Realtor 103, this is early access, so for anybody who wants to join, we will reserve a seat. Obviously, it gets pretty packed, so you guys will be getting that invite. But that's it. Show's over. Thank you guys for coming.